Welcome to the University of Michigan Dentistry Podcast Series, promoting oral health care worldwide.
The hinge axis allows us to mount casts on the articulator with a bite at an increased vertical dimension. And also it enables us to orient the pantograph to the horizontal axis. In order to locate the hinge axis, we're going to use the movements of the mandible. To do this, we have the mandible moving up and down, and we have attached to the mandible a stylus that can be adjusted, and we're going to use the movements of the mandible until we locate the hinge axis with this movable stylus. We also need a surface to work against with the stylus, and we have a flag that is attached to the maxillary arch and is stationary, and we use this to help us in the location of the axis. Now, in order to attach these to the mandible and the maxilla, we need a clutch, and we can use the clutch that we've already designed to attach this to the jaw. As we made the clutches, we made these so that they would come out of the mouth easily. We have slight indentation, so now we've got to lock these to the mandible and the maxilla, and we do this with the aid of a clutch anchor. We'll use a clutch anchor to anchor this to the teeth. In order to do that, we need to attach the anterior bars to the clutches. Now, you can use the regular pantograph bars. You don't need to take off the styluses or the tables. We just use the bar as it is. Now, in attaching the maxillary bar to the maxillary clutch, use the longest screw. You have 3 lengths of screws in the box that comes with the clutch kit. The longest screw is used to attach the clutch to the maxillary member, because you have this long manifold here and you need the longest screw. Make sure that the rod and the seat for the clutch are in good contact, and then start to screw into the screw hole. Now, you can attach these bars to the clutches many times without stripping the clutch screw hole if you have those oriented properly. So now we have the bar, anterior bar, attached to the clutch. The clutch anchors are, again, pieces of metal that attach to the anterior bar, and these go alongside of the buccal surfaces of the teeth. So this clutch anchor that has a screw and a clamp that fits over the anterior bar, as we have here, that'll be along the buccal surfaces of the teeth. And we place that in that position. There are 4 of these, and you would attach those to the buccal surfaces of the maxillary and mandibular clutch. We have now attached the clutch anchors to the mandibular clutch. The study cast model can be used effectively here to tell how far or where to place those bars in relationship to the teeth and also the gingival tissue. So you can try the study cast model in the clutch to tell where to set the clutch anchors. Then we should go to the mouth with the assembled clutch anchor and try this in the patient's mouth. We want to make sure that there is no impingement on the tissue. So check in there, make sure that the clutch is seated against the teeth firmly and does not impinge against the tissue. Is that does that feel all right? Okay. Now, once we've got the clutch anchors positioned, we want to use some kind of a cementing medium or luting medium to cement this to place. In this situation, we will use bite registration paste. Now, to prevent the material from getting all over the clutch, It is well to go over the clutch with a good coat of Vaseline or some kind of a separating media. So to protect the clutch so we can clean it out later, go over the clutch with some Vaseline. And then we mix up a mix of the bite registration paste, and then we lay a portion of it along between the clutch anchor on the buckle areas that will be against the buckle surfaces of the teeth. And we place this in the mouth. Okay, would you reach up and hold that, please? Make sure that's seated against the teeth. Good. Do the same to the mandibular clutch, and if the material gives you enough time, it's best to go ahead and cement these together, because the patient closing on the central bearing screw can hold these two together. Now close, please. Okay, close. Now with the patient holding the central bearing screw together with the clutches, we can go ahead and let this set up and lock the clutches to place. To aid us in the location of the terminal hinge axis, we need a reference point from which to start, and one convenience reference point would be the arbitrary hinge axis. So using the ruler that we have, we can go ahead and line this up on a line from the tragus of the ear to the corner of the eye and make a dot on the skin through the hole in the ruler, and this gives us one of our convenience reference points from which we can start. Then we want to center the stylus over this mark to start with. So the first thing we do is to center the stylus that is attached to the mandible over this point. Now we'd like the stylus as close to the skin as we can get so that we don't produce errors in transferring the axis point from the tip to the skin. So now we have the axis point centered over the axis pin centered over this arbitrary point. We now bring the flag into position. The flag provides attached to the maxilla, provides a surface to move against in the location of the axis. You don't have to have the flag attached to the clutch. You could actually take the paper and put it on the skin, but the flag attached to the maxillary clutch provides a very stable surface from which we can locate the axis. So with this stylus attached to the mandible and move with the mandible and our flag, we will now go ahead and locate the axis. What we would do is to start out by centering the stylus over one of the dots that is on the paper. You can see here that we have one of the dots oriented on the paper. Now what we will do is have the patient arc, opening and closing on the terminal hinge axis, and notice the way that the stylus is arcing. With your teeth together, please move forward and back. Okay, just open and close lazily against that. What you want to do is have the patient opening and closing on the first part of the posterior border movement. As you can see here, she's arcing. If she opens too far, open wide, you can see that the jaw comes forward and translates. So what we want to do is just open and close on that first part. Now close. You can see that we're arcing in an up and down position. And what we want to do is to head for the center of the circle. So using a simple graphics, we can point this out. You can see here that if you got arcing around the parameters of the circle, If you've got an arcing that's going up and down, you would move directly back towards the center of the circle. So the rule to remember is always head for the center of the circle. So back with the patient, we were heading, arcing, up and back, so we would want to, down and back, so we want to head up and back towards the center of the circle. So now just move the stylus, go back and up and select another dot and test it out again. So rub forward, please, all the way back. Now open and close, just lazily open and close. Now we're just arcing, mainly in an up and down direction here. We want to head straight back. Touch lightly, please. And we will move this back to another dot, and by a series of openings, adjusting to new dots, we can go ahead and locate the terminal hinge axis. Open, close, don't open too far. Open, close, open, close. Don't be moving around too much. So we continue to adjust, open and close, until we find that point where the stylus simply rotates around a circle. As you can see here, we're fairly close. Now, if the patient wanders all over the place, or you're not able to zero in and locate this dot accurately, it might suggest that the patient has some joint or muscle problems, and we would stop with the treatment of the case and put the patient on an occlusal splint. But we would adjust this until when the patient opens and closes on that terminal hinge movement, the patient simply rotates. Okay, just hold that lightly against the teeth together. Now, we need to transfer this point to the skin. And we need to be able to transfer it to the skin in repeated times accurately. We know that the skin moves as the patient is positioned in different positions, so when you go to transfer the axis point to the skin, you must have the patient seated upright and looking straight forward. So we'll tilt the patient upright, look straight forward, and what we'd like to do here is to have the Frankfurt horizontal on that patient about parallel with the floor. So we line up the patient with the Frankfurt horizontal about parallel to the floor. Now the patient can reproduce this time after time again. So this is the position we'd want the patient in when we transfer this to the skin. Now in order to transfer it to the skin, we need a little marking material. We use lipstick for this purpose. Take and put just a little bit of lipstick on the tip of that stylus because you want a very small dot. So put a little bit on the stylus. Patient seated upright, patient looking straight forward. We have the patient slide forward and back. Then we arc, make sure that we're arcing, have the patient close, touch the teeth together lightly, hold that position. Everything in the right position, we go in and we touch the skin and transfer that dot to the skin. Now you notice here, as is frequently the case, that the terminal hinge axis is quite a ways up and back from our arbitrary axis. The arbitrary axis was this point, and the true or the terminal hinge axis is up and back from the patient. Now what we would do in a situation to tell whether we're accurate in locating the axis, whether the patient is stable, we would go ahead and locate the axis 3 times on each side of the patient's head. And if those 3 locations, the dots transferred to the skin, are within the head of the stylus, then we know that we've located the axis properly. Now I said previously that it's well to have the stylus tip as close to the skin as possible, because we could create some error in transferring that stylus point from the flag to the skin. And I'll show you this on a simple diagram. If we have the patient's skin as we had here, and we had our flag against the skin, we had the stylus coming in against the flag, and that was operating through a sleeve that was attached to our mandible. So when we took the flag away and we bring the stylus in, we have a chance for error in this position. We would like to have this point as close to the skin as we can so that the distance between here and here is very slight. Now, if we had this stylus angled off in a direction such as this, because we didn't line up the anterior bars when we made the clutches, and then we transferred this point to the skin, you can see the error that we'd have in transferring that axis point from the flag to the skin. So we should have the flag as close as we can to the skin, and these, the stylus tip, coming in at right angles to the skin. Once we have finished the location of the hinge axis, we're through with the clutches being anchored to the teeth. We go ahead and undo these 4 screws that tighten the clutch anchors. We can pull the clutch anchors to the side to break the eugenol material away from the teeth, and then the patient can open and all of the apparatus should come out of the patient's mouth. We need to have some method of recording this terminal hinge axis point that we transferred to the skin so that we can come back and use this point on successive occasions whenever we mount master casts on the articulator. We can do this 1 or 2 ways. We can either use a triangulation method of where we measure the distances between several points and we triangulate the position of the axis point, or we use a permanent marking material and permanently mark this on the skin. Now, the materials that we use for permanently marking, we're going to demonstrate here. The material that we use for the permanent marking is the mercuric sulfide. The mercuric sulfide is deposited just under the epidermis of the skin. It becomes a permanent mark, small permanent mark on the side of the patient's head. The vehicle we use to carry this to the patient or to the skin is alcohol, 97% alcohol. And what we want to do is to mix a little bit of the mercuric sulfide with the alcohol to provide a solution. So we take, the thing is, we need a very small amount, so just pick up a little bit on the end of the stick and mix it with our alcohol. And just enough to make a kind of a putty mix of the material. Then we need to cleanse the skin with alcohol just before we insert this under the skin. There are 2 ways to insert the material under the skin. One is to use a 27 gauge regular hypodermic needle. We can touch this. Some of the material comes up in the lumen of the needle, and this can be used to deposit the solution under the skin. There is a regular marking needle that is available that we have here and we're going to use here. It is a series of 2 or 3 needles took together, and this can be used to carry the material to the skin, and then you simply rotate this in depositing the material under the skin. So we need to go over to the patient, sterilize the area, and deposit the little material under the skin. So we hold the skin tight so that we can get under the skin, dab the area with the alcohol to get the material away, and sterilize the skin, not enough to take away your dot. And then we put the needle there against the skin and rotate it a little bit, depositing a little bit of material underneath the skin, and that's all we need. Now, you shouldn't draw any hemorrhage. If you do draw a little hemorrhage, the best thing to do is to put a cotton roll over the area. so that the hemorrhage doesn't wash the material out, and then let the patient go a day or two. It's best to have the patient come back in a day or two and see if the material is still under the skin or you're losing it. And then you can remark if you need to, so that you don't have to relocate the mark or the axis. So this is a means of permanently recording this axis point so that we can mount successive casts on the articulator in the same position. In a practice exercise using our patient articulator, we would do the same thing as we did in the mouth. We would take the clutches and we attach our clutch anchors to the clutches, and we would lute these to the cast the same way as we luted them to the teeth in the mouth. Here again using plaster or zinc oxide eugenol. You do not need to lubricate the teeth. If you lubricate the teeth, you might find it difficult for the material to stick onto the teeth on the articulator patient. Now, there are a couple of modifications or variations that you need to use because you're using an articulator rather than a patient. Here, the maxillary member of the articulator moves, where in the patient it's the mandible that moves. You would want to attach, therefore, the stylus to the maxillary member of the articulator so that it will move with the maxillary model as it moves. So you attach the stylus to the maxillary clutch and the flag to the mandibular clutch. Now, in order to simulate the skin, you would want to use something that would simulate the skin. We can do this by using the mounting stud. The mounting stud goes in a small hole in the condyle, as you see here. And we can place that in the condyle. We have some small pieces of cordboard that are cut in squares. And we have some red boxing wax that we can put on the back of that cardboard, and we can attach that to this mounting stud. And this can represent the skin. And if you secure that with a piece of wax in this position and the stud there, you can go ahead and locate the hinge axis 3 times on the articulator, the same way as you would the mouth. We'd go ahead and orient the flag over the skin area. And then when you've located the axis, you would take the flag away and transfer the located axis to the skin, which is represented by the cordboard. And go ahead and do it 3 times to see how accurately you can do it on the articulator. Now, in order to make the articulator more like the patient, you can take a sharp piece of string and tie the upper and lower member of the articulator together so you only have about a 10 to 15 degree opening of the articulator the same way as you would the mouth. Remember, the patient cannot open wide or they translate. So in order to practice locating the hinge axis, you should restrict yourself in opening the articulator to about 10 to 15 degrees. So with these modifications, we can go ahead now and practice the location of the hinge axis on the articulator.
You've been listening to a presentation from the University of Michigan School of Dentistry, which is dedicated to supporting open learning and open educational resources. This recording is licensed under the Creative Commons. It may be reused and redistributed for nonprofit use. Please attribute materials to the University of Michigan School of Dentistry and redistribute under this same license. For more information on how this and other University of Michigan School of Dentistry recordings may be used, visit www.dent.umich.edu/license.